Most people have faced this, but almost no one grasps it. You reach out to your cat. Slowly, carefully, exactly the way you're supposed to. No sudden reaction, no stress, just a quiet attempt to connect. And they pull back. Not dramatically, not aggressively, just enough to stop the moment from happening. A slight shift, a small turn, a refusal so subtle it almost feels polite, but unmistakable. If it ended there, it would make sense. But it doesn't. Because a few minutes later, something else occurs. Another person enters the room. They don't move as carefully. They don't think about it as much. They reach out without hesitation. And your cat leans in, stays, accepts the touch you were just denied. That's the part that lingers. Not the rejection, but the inconsistency. Most people try to resolve it quickly. They call it preference, mood, random behavior. But those explanations don't hold for long. Because the moment doesn't feel random when you're inside it. It feels structured, selective, almost decided in advance. As if something already happened before the hand ever moved, and you weren't part of it. So the question isn't why your cat refused the touch. The question is, what did they notice before you even reached out? Touch is not the beginning. For humans, touch is generally the start of interaction. It's how we initiate closeness, how we test comfort, how we signal intention. We reach out first and expect the relationship to follow. But for a cat, touch is not where connection starts. It's where it is confirmed. By the time your hand gets close enough to make contact, something has already been decided. Not consciously, not in a way you can see, but through a series of subtle signals that happen before movement, before intention becomes visible. Your presence, your pace, the way you enter a space. These things arrive before your hand does, and your cat is already responding to them based on calculation. So when a cat pulls away, it's rarely about the touch itself. It's about everything that came before it. The invisible selection. Cats don't respond to people equally because they don't experience people equally. To you, two individuals might look similar, both calm, both quiet, both approaching gently. But to a cat, the difference can be immediate. Not in obvious behavior, but in subtle consistency. The rhythm of movement, the predictability of pauses, the way attention is directed or not directed toward them. Cats are highly sensitive to patterns that humans don't consciously register. They notice interruptions, hesitations, small inconsistencies between intention and action. And over time, they build a kind of internal filter, not based on who you are, but on how stable your presence feels. Some people pass through that filter easily, others don't, and the difference is often invisible from the outside. Control and okay. There is something else that shapes this interaction, something even quieter. Cats experience touch differently because they experience control differently. For many animals, physical contact is neutral. For cats, it is negotiated. It is allowed, not assumed. When someone reaches out, the question is not simply, is this safe? It's, is this mine to accept? Cats are drawn to interactions where they retain that control, where the approach doesn't demand a response, where the space between them and the person remains adjustable. This is why some people seem to be chosen without trying. They don't close the distance too quickly. They don't hold the moment too tightly. They allow the cat to decide when the interaction begins and when it ends. And in that space, touch becomes possible. Why some people are allowed. It often looks like preference, as if cats simply like certain people more. But what appears as preference is usually alignment. Some people move in ways that match a cat's expectations. Their timing feels consistent. Their attention feels steady but not intrusive. Their presence doesn't fluctuate in ways that create uncertainty. Others, even with good intentions, create small disruptions, slight unpredictability, a mismatch between what the cat anticipates and what actually happens. These differences are subtle, too subtle for most humans to notice, but not for a cat. So when a cat leans into someone's hand, It's not always affection in the way we define it. It's recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that this presence feels understandable, predictable, safe to engage with, and that recognition is what allows the moment to continue. The moment before contact. If you slow these interactions down enough, there is always a moment right before touch. A pause that most people move through too quickly to notice. In that pause, the cat is not deciding in a dramatic way. There's no visible calculation, but something shifts, a slight softening, a small stillness, or the opposite, a tightening, a subtle withdrawal. That moment determines everything. But because it happens so quickly and so quietly, people miss it. They focus on the outcome, the accepted touch or the rejected one, without seeing the process that led there. And without that process, the behavior feels unpredictable. But it isn't. The hand they don't have to think about. There are moments when a cat accepts touch without hesitation. The hand approaches, and they lean in almost immediately. But that moment didn't start there. It was built over time, through repetition so consistent it no longer needs to be questioned. The cat isn't reacting to the hand itself. They're responding to a pattern they already understand. The way this person moves, the way they enter a space, the way they've approached before. All of it has become predictable. And predictability for a cat removes the need for caution. So when they lean in without thinking, it's not because they're being more affectionate in that moment. It's because the interaction doesn't require evaluation anymore. It's already been processed long before it happened. The hand becomes familiar even before it arrives. When the same person gets different answers, there's something else that feels even more confusing. The same person doesn't always get the same response. One moment the cat accepts touch, leans in, stays, and another time, under what seems like identical conditions, they pull away, quietly, without explanation. But the difference is rarely in the moment itself. It's in the details surrounding it, the slight change in pace, the shift in attention, the way the approach feels just a little less consistent than before. Cats don't respond to who you are in a fixed way. They respond to how your presence arrives, each time. So even familiar hands are still being read, not fully reevaluated, but subtly checked against what's expected. And when something feels even slightly off, the response adjusts. Not dramatically, just enough. The touch that ends too late. Sometimes the acceptance isn't where things change. It's what happens after. Cat allows the touch. They stay. They lean into it even briefly. And then, at a certain point, something shifts. They move away. Not abruptly, not with force, but clearly. The interaction ends. From a human perspective, it can feel sudden, as if the cat changed their mind. But from the cat's perspective, nothing changed. The boundary was always there. The touch was acceptable for a specific length of time. A quiet limit that doesn't need to be signaled in advance. And when that limit is reached, the interaction closes. Not as rejection, not as discomfort, but as completion. Because for a cat, allowing touch is not an open-ended state. It's a moment with edges. Whıch hands? Not every hand feels the same to a cat. There's a moment, small, almost invisible, when a cat decides whether your presence feels predictable or uncertain. It isn't about how much you love them. It's about how clearly they can read you, the way you move, the pauses you leave, the pressure in your touch. Some people arrive with noise in their movements, slight hesitations, sudden changes, hidden tension. Others move in a way that feels continuous, understandable. And for a cat, that difference is everything. Because touch for them is not just contact. It's a form of trust measured in patterns. So when a cat allows someone closer, leans in, stays still, doesn't pull away, it's not random preference. It's recognition. When you start to see it, there's a point where this begins to change. Not for the cat, but for you. You start noticing the space before you reach out. The way your presence arrives before your hand does. The small adjustments that either maintain or disrupt the quiet stability a cat is responding to. And suddenly, those moments don't feel random anymore. The acceptance, the refusal, the slight lean forward, or the almost invisible step back. They begin to form a pattern. Not obvious, not loud, but consistent. And once you see that pattern, it becomes harder to think of a cat's response as unpredictable. It starts to feel precise.